John chapter 10, verse 11. It'll be on the screen for you. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. But a hireling, he who is not the shepherd, one who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees. And the wolf catches the sheep and scatters them. The hireling flees because he is a hireling and does not care about the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and I know my sheep, and I'm known by my own. As the Father knows me, even so I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. Before you're seated, high five somebody and say, you're more than a number. In honor of Mother's Day, I wanted to tell a little story about my mom. She was the kind of mom who would literally do anything for her two boys. And she made that very clear that we were priority and important to her. She made her love for us so very apparent every single day, so much so that even at a young age, I understood a level of manipulation that was at my disposal due to her predisposition to do whatever it took to take care of me. And so I was the firstborn, and for the first 3.5, 4 years of my life, I stayed with my grandparents while my parents worked all day. And so I was, spoiled. But then we moved from the small town that we lived in where my grandparents lived to the larger town where my parents worked, and it was a 35-minute drive. And so instead of me staying with my grandmother because they would drop me off in the morning and go to work and then come back, well, now they were already at the place. So instead, I had to go to the daycare at the place where my mom worked. And I'll never forget my first day going to daycare. I did not like it. I think a lot of the reason why I didn't like it is because they told me what to do and when to do it. And I'd never experienced such. Granny did what I wanted, when I wanted, how I wanted, and I really enjoyed that. So I got to daycare, and there were other kids there, and I couldn't do whatever I wanted, and the teachers were telling us when to do stuff, and they just seemed mean and hateful. And so I got about done with it a little bit after lunch. And I said, I'm done with this. And they said, well, you can't leave because your mom, it's going to be a while before your mom gets off work to come pick you up. I said, oh, you don't understand. I know how to get my mom here. And so I confidently ran over and got on the merry-go-round and got it going as fast as I possibly could. And then when I got it to the height of its speed, I jumped off, skinned my arm up something horrible, and my mom came and picked me up. I said, well, you can't get your mom, come get you. I said, watch me. Because I knew that she loved me, she cared about me, and that if I needed her, she was going to show up and be there for me. And it is in that sense that I want you to see what John is revealing to us as he shows us this statement that Jesus made when he said, I am the good shepherd. He was letting us know that he is not a distant God, a religious CEO, but he used the picture of a shepherd. Now, last week we saw just earlier in this text where he was talking, because this is all going on after a man had been cast out of the temple because he was not able to answer doctrinal questions effectively for the Pharisees. So they kicked him out of the temple. Jesus goes and finds the man, starts to talk to him, minister to him. The Pharisees are watching. That's how this is all going on. And Jesus talked about last week being the door or the gate. And basically what he was talking about was being the one who guards the sheep. But then he goes a step further here in verse 11, and he goes ahead and says, I am the good shepherd. He is going to show us and paint for us a picture that is powerful. And he does it I want you to see three things in this statement that he makes and how he describes it. The first thing I want you to see is the drastic contrast between who he is and what they had experienced in religion. he begins to paint a picture of what religion is filled with. Religion is filled with what he called a hireling. Because you understand that there were two types of people who interacted with sheep in that culture. There were shepherds, and shepherds were those who owned the sheep. These sheep belonged to them. Their livelihood was connected to the sheep, and they cared for the sheep. The sheep mattered to them. But you understand, a shepherd cannot 100% all the time in the earthly realm be with the sheep. And so sometimes they would have to hire people who would watch the sheep. There was a drastic difference between the relationship of a shepherd and a hireling. A shepherd was there because he was invested. A hireling was there because he was getting paid. There's a big difference between investing yourself in someone and something and being paid to do something. In fact, I would imagine that there is a large portion of people underneath the sound of my voice that are not invested in your workplace. You're just getting paid to be there. Come on, somebody. Y'all real quiet on this Presbyterian morning. The issue with the hireling literally comes down to ownership. You see, when you don't own the sheep, when they don't belong to you, you have a limit to what you're willing to do in relation to them. He was saying the reason why religion only goes so far, the reason why religious leaders only go so far, the reason why most people in your life only go so far is because there is a relationship deficiency where they're looking to get something out of their interaction with you. It is never about the fact that they believe in you. It's about what can they get because they're connected to you. We are surrounded in our lives with hirelings. It can be family members. It can be so-called friends, co-workers, bosses, teachers, individuals. There are people in our life that their only interest in our life is what they can get because they're connected to our life. And what happens is when you live with hirelings, you're going to find something out. That when difficulty shows up, they have a tendency to dip out. Jesus said, I'm not like the hirelings, because the hireling is there in the green pasture. But the moment the wolf shows up, the moment danger is apparent, the hireling says, I'm not getting paid enough to deal with this. It is the contrast where a wolf reveals something that has always been true. I want you to understand something. The hireling did not decide in the moment that the wolf showed up that he didn't care enough about the sheep to stay. He had already decided that before the wolf showed up. It just revealed what he already was. And some of you have been very frustrated in your life because you're regularly finding hirelings being revealed by the pressure you're dealing with. But I want to encourage you today, they were always that way. You say, I just don't understand. They left when things got tough. Well, they were always going to leave then. See, because if something can cause you to leave me, then you are a hireling in my life. Boy, it's quiet today. Anybody can stay when it's easy. But faithfulness is revealed when danger shows up, when the wolf shows up. He's talking in the earshot of these Pharisees. And he's letting them see that they are a living illustration of hirelings. They have position, but they do not have covenant. They have a title, but they're not willing to make a sacrifice. They have places of authority, but they are not operating in love. And he's trying to not necessarily, and I want you to see something. He's speaking in a way that is convicting to them, but the point of the statement is not necessarily to convict them, but to give you the contrast to who he is. He's not trying to talk them down. He's trying to reveal to you the level of who he is. He does not want you to despise your hireling. He wants you to recognize your shepherd. See, sometimes we get all caught up in hating on those who are not doing what they were never called to do. You have to understand, you can't have 27 shepherds. You got one shepherd and a lot of hirelings. Your problem is you keep ascribing shepherd loyalty to hirelings and then getting frustrated when those hirelings show you that they were never shepherds. But what Jesus is trying to say is if you'll stop looking at all those people that are going to continue to disappoint you, and you will see that I am the good shepherd. I'm the one you've been looking for. I'm the one you've been searching for. I'm the one who doesn't leave when it gets difficult. I'm the one who's more invested in you than I am on the return on my investment in you. Secondly, he shows them, so just a second, a hireling protects himself first, but a shepherd protects the sheep first. He wanted them to see that contrast. But then he goes on to talk about the cost. Because you see, he tells them that a shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. Jesus defines himself, defines his entire earthly existence with the concept of sacrifice. Jesus does not highlight at any time his charisma and ability to draw a crowd. You will never hear Jesus in the gospel go, hey man, you ever seen the crowds I can get out? Never talked about it. Was never impressed with it. Was never wanted anybody to think about that. I'll tell you what else Jesus didn't define himself with. Miracles. Read the Gospels. Jesus did mind-blowing miracles and then called the person to the side and said, if you don't mind, don't tell anybody. Because he wasn't here to do miracles. He didn't even define himself with sermons. He didn't say, I am the great preacher who has come to preach the word to you. He preached the most powerful, poignant messages that would ever be preached, but they didn't define him. You know what defined him from the moment he was born until the moment he ascended into heaven? What defined him was he came to go to the cross. He said, I define myself not by what I do around you, do in you. I define myself by what I've come to do for you. That word lays down in the Greek means to deliberately place down, to intentionally surrender. He is not talking about an accidental death. You understand that when they came to get Jesus in the garden, and they asked him if he was Jesus, he said, I am he. And when he said that, the power of God was so prevalent in that moment, it knocked them all flat on their faces. They did not overpower him. They did not force him to go. He willingly went with them. When he was hanging on the cross, it was not the nails in his hands that held him there. It was his willingness to be a sacrifice for you and a sacrifice for me. Because when he laid his life down, he was not doing it because he had to. He was doing it because he chose to. The cross was not an ambush. It was his assignment. He said he lays down his life for the sheep. This is a powerful language he uses. It is substitutionary in nature. He's saying, I didn't die near you. I didn't die because of you. I literally died for you. Because what happened to him was an attack that was meant for us, and he took it for us. As the picture of the shepherd, the wolf does not come to eat the shepherd. He wants the sheep. And yet it is the shepherd who says, I will not let you have the sheep. If you want to get to them, you've got to go through me. You have to understand that Jesus did not go to the cross for his sin because he had none. There was no reason why Jesus should have died on that cross that day, because he was guilty of nothing. But he went to that cross that day because you and I have been guilty of sin from the day we were born. We were born in sin, and we've continued in sin. And everything we do, we can't fix our sin. And our sin, the wages of sin, are still death. I know nobody wants to talk about it in church anymore. We don't talk about sin, we talk about struggle and mistakes. No, it's sin. It's sin. And it breaks our relationship with God. But what you need to see in the picture of the shepherd is what religion won't show you. And that is that our relationship with God is not broken because he's disgusted by our sin. Our relationship with God is broken because we think our sin disqualifies us from him loving us. And he said, while you were yet sinners. He's not the one who's been running from you. He's not the one who refuses to be in your presence. You're the one who continues to, in your shame and your guilt, reject him and push him away, because he came to die for you. He cares for you, and he doesn't care where you've been or what you've done, because it's not about where you've been or what you've done. It's about you're one of his. He paid the price for you. The wolf had a legal claim. Sin gave us a legal reason why we should die, but he died for us. Sin had a legal claim that there should be judgment rained down on us, and yet he took the judgment for us. He stood between us and destruction. He was willing to stay when it cost him everything. I think one of the most overlooked realities in the gospel is the Garden of Gethsemane. Because it is in the garden that we see two things. We see, first of all, the fact that in his humanity, Jesus was well aware of the price he was about to be asked to pay. And because of his humanity, he asked a question. He said, if there is any other way. Because I think sometimes we get in this idea that Jesus came to die on the cross, and therefore we're like, hey, that's what he wanted to do. No, he only did it because it had to be done. It was not enjoyable. It was not easy. It was difficult. It was painful. But he made a decision that either I do this or the wolf devours my sheep. He had a decision to make, because you see, a real shepherd will not run when the wolf comes. He'll stand in the gap and make up the hedge between the sheep and the wolf. The third thing I want you to see is the covenant that is involved in what he said. He said, I know them and they know me. He's not a hireling. He's made an incredible sacrifice. But lastly, he shows us that he wants real relationship with us. That word gnesko in the Greek means covenant knowing. It is intimate, it is relational, it is deeply personal. It is more than awareness. He said, I know you better than being aware of you. Have you ever had somebody come and talk to you? And I do this pretty regularly because I have a hard time sometimes remembering names. I remember faces really well, but names not as well. Somebody said, do you know so-and-so? Vaguely. It's familiar. I want you to understand that if someone petitions Jesus about you, his answer is not, yeah, that's familiar. No, his answer is, he knows your birthday. He knows how many hairs are still left on your head. He knows what color they would be if you didn't. He knows your thought life. He knows your activities. He knows the motivation behind your activities. He wants you to know that you are not kind of familiar to him, but he knows you. And in this relationship, he goes and draws an interesting contrast. He says, as the Father knows me, and I know him, I know them. He's saying that at the same level that the Trinity is intertwined, he knows us. And he knew before he went to the cross. He knew about your failure. He knew about your addiction. He knew about your divorce. He knew about your rebellion. He knew about your bitterness. He knew about the hidden struggle that you think no one else knows about. He knew all of that beforehand. And he still went to the cross for you. I think sometimes we have the idea that God is like our relationships. Because I don't know about you, but anytime I get in a relationship, especially one that seems to be going really good, like all of a sudden this person comes into my life and is like, wow, where have they been my whole life? There's a part of me that has lived long enough to go, well, we'll see what it is about me that ruins this. I do not kid you. I've stood at the back of a service on a Sunday night where a guest pastor had showed up at the church where I pastored. One of the deacons on the board standing back there is just bragging me up to this guest pastor. Isn't he the best preacher you ever heard? Oh my goodness, we're so proud of him. We're so glad he's our pastor. I mean, just going in on it. Before the next Sunday morning, Saturday night, I crash a secret board meeting that man called to try to have me fired. I had a person in this church years ago who had been going to this church for a few years and had been one of those hi-bye, how you doing, Pastor Ryan? Not very close to me at all, really, but not a problem. Stopped me on a Sunday morning after service with tears in their eyes. Said, I failed you because I should have been covering you in prayer. I should have had your back as you were going through struggles. And I just want you to know I'm here no matter what. 3 weeks later, he wouldn't speak to me. So you got to understand why I kind of when relationships begin, I'm like, what are you going to find out about me that's going to suddenly change everything? And sometimes I think we come to God like that. We think, and can I get real with you on Mother's Day? There are probably people in this room whose entire perspective of you could be altered by what they don't know about you. It's just truth. I've done my dead level best to build this church out of believers and not church people, but there's still some that slip through. You'll get that in a minute. Because I really don't like people who are here for religion. I like people who are really following Jesus. But there's probably people in this room who'll change their whole opinion of you if they knew where you were last night. Change their whole opinion of you if they knew what you did 6 years ago. But I want you to stop worrying about them because they're not your shepherd. I'm not even your shepherd. I'm the under shepherd. He's the shepherd. And I want to tell you something about him. He knew about it before you did it, and he still doesn't care. He's still here. And he's not going anywhere. But I want to show you one thing, and I'm done, that I never really saw until I was looking at this again yesterday. He says, I know them. But he also says, they know me. And I got to thinking about that. Wait a second. We're spending our whole Christian walk trying to get to know God, right? And there's some truth to that. We're learning Scripture. We're learning how to walk it out. We're learning how to be more like Him. We're seeing fresh revelation of who He is in our lives daily. But what I realized is, and I don't know if you can relate to that, I think you can, is there's something on the inside of us that before we even know Him, knows Him. It's like when you come into a place you could never been in church your whole life. You come into a place where the presence of God is. Something wakes up in you. I don't know. There's something about this. You know why? Because not only does He know you, you know Him. He said, they know my voice. And many of you have been trying to listen to voices that you know aren't His. That's why you're miserable on the inside, is because you're listening to the voices of culture. You're listening to the voices of convenience. You're listening to the voices of condemnation. And those voices continue to tell you something entirely different than what He's trying to tell you. And even though you believe those voices, you know those voices aren't the voice. And today, I just feel like in this room, some of you are going to feel that tug of you don't even know how you know, but you know because it's His voice. And you know Him even though you haven't known Him like you need to. Even though you're not walking in relationship, there is something inside of you. The Bible calls it deep calls out to deep. There is a divine desire and a divine design on the inside of you that from the moment you're born is yearning to be known by your Creator. And you know His voice, you know His presence, you know His essence. You just haven't fully surrendered to it. Today I want you to know that you are in covenant with Him. He knows you and you know Him. You are fully known and you are fully loved by your shepherd. Stand with me all over the house.